Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Farhan bin Abdul Razak, and for my individual assignment of Advanced FIQH MUAMALAT, I choose the topic about the concept and the application of buy on Urbun in Islamic derivative market system. Without wasting any time, let's go to the presentation. For introduction, the capital market in Malaysia looks to the marketplace for long-term financial assets and consisting of the all debt instruments, whether the government or private with maturities of quite 1 year and company stock with no fixed maturities and commodities features. While the derivative market refers to a good range of instruments, including futures, contracts, options, and swaps made supported price values and underlying assets. Derivatives also are considered to cut back risk because derivative instruments depends only on the underlying assets, whether financial or non-financial. Prohibition on gambling activities and uncertainty, which is mean gharar, in Islam cause option contract, futures, and the other derivatives contract that seem to be fully accepted by Islamic scholars. At the request of many, especially among Muslims who desire a halal capital market and to urge blessing in business from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, then the Islamic capital market is created following the notice of the general public who have realized the importance of halal and illegal for capital market instrument developed. This is clearly indicate that each activity in the economy will be an act of worship and rewarded if the conditions that have been set are good term of fulfilling the demands of Aqidah, Akhlaq or Sharia. So, the derivative contract that contain elements of uncertainty and speculation don't seem to be accepted in Islamic Sharia. However, this doesn't mean that Muslim investors don't have initiative to cut back the possible risk encountered even with the buy on Urbun contract investor that can reduce the chance that which will occur. This often because there an option features inside buy on Urbun contract where the vendor and also the buyer make an agreement on the value and date contracts and advance payment made. Therefore, if the customer fails to satisfy the transaction on an everyday basis, it will automatically lose to the given deposit, but if otherwise, the given deposit money is taken into account and is part of the worth. So, generally, the implementation of Islamic instrument has been developed as an alternative to uplift the capital market system in Malaysia. Hence, Islamic derivative market is considered as an alternative to the conventional derivative markets that are not Sharia compliant. Buy on Urbun contract is one of the instruments that used in the derivative market contract. However, there are different opinions about the necessity of buy on Urbun among the classical and the contemporary scholars. This study discussed the argument of the scholars associated with the contract of buy on Urbun and explained the Islamic derivative market system. It is clearly shown that from the fiqh perspective, the implementation of the contract is one of the Islamic derivative. Okay, now we move to the concept and the application of buy on Urbun. Buy on Urbun is a sale contract which is a small part of the price is paid as down payment or deposit by the buyer, which the main objective for remaining price is to exchange is a future date. In the case that the buyer perform the contract, that means the amount of Urbun will be part of the price. But if the buyer did not execute the sale, he will lose the down payment, which is considered a gift to the seller. Urbun represents the very simple concept of a down payment. Ibn Qudamah defined it as a transaction whereby the buyer buys a commodity and pays a deposit of 1 dirham or more on the understanding that the deposit will be considered part of the purchase price if the buyer decides to continue with the contract. If the buyer decides to withdraw from the contract, the seller will forfeit the deposit. In Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 275, Allah says, Allah has permitted trade and prohibited interest, which means riba. This verse is general for all different kind of sale. Either there is clear evidence from Quran and Sunnah which prohibit the sale. For the case of buying Urbun, we don't have correct and strong evidence which prohibit buying Urbun. So the sale will stay under permissibility. The division of Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami has ruled that the conventional option contract applicable in the current financial market is a new contract that is not included any uqud musamma, and has even argued that the conventional options are not a mal, benefit or financial right, which means haq mali, which can be exchanged and decide that it is not allowed according to the Sharia view. Therefore, the implementation of the Islamic derivative market has been created as an alternative to replace the conventional derivative market system, which is not allowed according to the Sharia view. For the implementation of derivative instrument in Islam, generally known as call option, must be structured based on Sharia principle. Therefore, the Urban contract can be applied to ensure Sharia compliant call option. An option gives the holder or buyer a right, but it is not obligated to buy or sell particular asset at a price agreed on or before the date set by the seller. To get the option, the buyer must pay a premium to the seller. The call option gives the holder or the buyer the right to buy, while the put option gives the holder or the buyer the right to sell. An option that uses an Urbun contract can only generate call option features and may not even involve ribawi or soft asset. Buying Urbun is also allowed by Majma' Fiqh al-Islami, provided that the waiting time has been set and it does not involve the exchange of ribawi or soft asset. Therefore, with the implementation of products known as Sharia compliant, other than use uqud musamma to produce the same economic or commercial effect as conventional options. Sharia compliant options have been drafted using urban contract. The definition of buying urban contract is a person buys an asset and deposits a sum of money on the part of seller, provided that if the purchase is continued, then the amount of the deposit will cover part of the price. However, the application of buying urban contract in the Islamic capital market has caused disagreement among the majority of ulama, past and contemporary ulama, which is seen by the contemporary ulama is the form of ruksah. Therefore, what needs to be discussed here is whether the application of the buying urban contract can be disputed or not. Based on the discussion of the classical ulama about buying urban, the majority of the ulama, Jumhur, did not require buying urban transaction due to the presence of elements such as consuming other people's property in vain and containing the element of gharar. Even in the bio-urban, there are two damage conditions, namely the condition of giving advance money to the seller, and the second condition is the returning the sale if you do not like. Therefore, the sale and purchase of bio-urban invalid based on Amir ibn Shu'aib. Prophet Muhammad SAW forbid urban trading. Hadith is narrated by Abu Dawud. The previous scholar did not agree on the necessity of buying Urbun because if the deposit money given by the buyer is considered charged and belongs to the seller when the buyer cancels the purchase intention. Among the sects that do not allow buying Urbun transaction and consider it illegal by the Shafi'i, Maliki and some Hanbali scholars. The Hanafi school, on the other hand, consider this transaction to be corrupt. According to Mustafa Al-Zarqa, states that use Urbun in modern trade today and argues that the use of Urbun is accepted by custom and law. This is because Urbun is a useful contract which can be used to facilitate involvement in the transaction or to ensure the seller does not change his mind after making the contract. However, if the seller needs compensation for the possible losses due to the contract that has been made, the need for business insurance is clearer nowadays. This is because the seller who has the goods or the manufacturer has the purpose to sell and has to wait until the buyer confirms that the contract can cause to the seller to lose the opportunity to sell the goods at a higher price. However, in this case of Urban, it cannot be considered as compensation because the contract is made based on the seller's own wishes. The element of horror in the bio-urban contract, which is the debate of scholars, there is also an element of speculation in the derivative contract. This has been stated by Al-Darir, who does not require the bio-urban contract because it equals options in the conventional and it may be used for speculative purposes. The question is such an action absolutely forbidden in Islam? In general, taking advantage of price differences is not an obstacle from an Islamic point of view. If this activity is prohibited, of course, the principle of buying and selling such as buying al-muzayyadah and murabaha are also prohibited because both involve the activity of taking advantage of the original price difference, which mean we know as markup. However, the principle is allowed in Islam. An example that can be seen in speculative activities to ensure the price of what in stable state can be made through the derivative market, where the determination of the price of what made by the farmer is placing the price at the present time using the buy on urban contract after getting the buyer of the wheat. This is because farmers are worried that the price of wheat in the future will fall, and this is a step made by the farmer to ensure the stability of the price of wheat, and this is said to be speculation. However, based on the result of a study conducted by the SAC, found that speculative activity exists in any form of business, and it is not limited to stock market trading only. Indeed, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who determines the atmosphere of economic prosperity and depression, I do not want to take steps to determine the price because I do not want later in the hereafter some of you will demand back his property and blood from me because of the norm determined by the price. Hadith narrated by Tirmizi. For conclusion, it can be said that bio-urban trading is an alternative in derivative instruments and certified as a Sharia compliance product. The application of bio-urban contract is currently considered in accordance with the market uruf because it does not conflict with the Sharia principle that have been determined by Islam. Bio-urban is generally considered to be called option because both use strategies to reduce risk or as a method used by the traders so that they can gain flexibility before entering into large contract especially. According to commonly rational basis in option similar to bio-urban is more of a strategy to reduce risk. For overall point of view with for the view of the Sharia rules on contract clarity are very important to analyze an instrument through a simple approach based on the factors of tijari, maslahah and avoiding difficulties. The Sharia compliant requirements contained in the bio-urban contract are able to control some negative characteristics and further combat the clearly oppressive and unfair practices contained in the derivative market such as elements of gharar, usury, manipulation, and so on. Therefore, the existence of Sharia-compliant derivative instruments will be beneficial and in turn can reduce the adverse features contained in the conventional derivatives. This is clearly shows that the application of Urbun contract in the derivative market is necessary to expand the use of the Sharia-compliant instruments, and the application of Urbun contract does not need to be disputed because it is in accordance with the Sharia guidelines set by Islam. That's all from me. Thank you.